When life gets really overwhelming, where do you turn? For millions of people, it's not a therapist office, it's an anonymous online forum. Today, we're going to unpack a really fascinating study that shows how Reddit became this unlikely but absolutely vital safe space for mental health. Let's dive in. So, to really get why these online spaces are so important, you first have to understand just how big this issue is. According to the World Health Organization, a staggering 1 in 8 people all across the globe is living with a mental health condition. We're talking hundreds of millions of people dealing with things like depression and anxiety every single day. And yet, even though it's so incredibly common, there's this powerful stigma that's still attached to it. And that stigma, whether it's from society or even within institutions, creates a huge, huge barrier that stops so many people from getting the professional help they need. So that brings up a really important question. If those traditional doors feel closed off, where do you go? Well, for a massive and frankly growing number of people, the answer is the digital world. More specifically, the anonymous, super accessible communities on Reddit. All right, here's our game plan for today. We'll start by looking at why people are turning to this digital confessional. Then we'll figure out what a safe space really is. We'll get into the clever ways researchers decoded millions of posts, uncover the 4 big topics that pop up everywhere, and then see the really stark differences between how depression and anxiety are talked about. And of course, we'll wrap up with why all of this matters. So what is it about Reddit that makes it the go-to digital confessional? Well, it really just boils down to 2 things: anonymity and accessibility. I mean, when you're worried about being judged, being able to post without using your real name is a total game changer. It gives people a much-needed outlet when they're facing all sorts of barriers to traditional mental health care. But what really turns a simple online forum into a genuine safe space? It's not just about being online, right? It's about building a real, actual sense of community. And the researchers behind this study used a pretty powerful theory to understand exactly how that happens. Okay, so first let's just put a name to these things. Formally, they're known as online health communities, or OHCs for short, and their goal is pretty simple: be an easy-to-access place where people can share what they're going through to find support, whether that's just an emotional connection or some practical information. So how does a subreddit become a lifeline? Well, it comes down to these 4 key ingredients. First up, you've got membership, that feeling that you belong, that you fit in. Second is influence, the idea that your voice actually matters and people will listen. Third is integration. The group helps you because you all share the same goals. And finally, maybe the most important piece of the puzzle, a shared emotional connection. That's the bond that forms when someone else says, "Hey, I know exactly what you mean. I've been there too." When you get all 4 of those working together, that's when an anonymous forum becomes a true community. Okay, so the researchers had their theory, but they also had a massive challenge on their hands. We're talking over 12,000 posts from 16 different subreddits. How in the world do you make sense of all of that? How do you listen to a million anonymous voices all at once? Now, I know this chart looks a little complicated, but the method they used is actually brilliant. They took a 2-part approach. First, they let a powerful computer algorithm sift through all of that data to find hidden patterns. Then, human researchers stepped in to figure out what those patterns actually meant. It's the perfect blend of machine-level scale and real human insight. And that first part, the computational part, is called topic modeling. The easiest way to think about it is like a super high-tech sorting machine for words. You just feed it thousands and thousands of posts, and it automatically starts clustering words that tend to show up together. This reveals the main themes or topics people are talking about, all without any human bias telling it what to look for. And this is a peek at what that sorting machine found. Over on the left, you can see the themes from the depression subreddits. Words like suicide, love, hurt, and hopeless are jumping out. But then look at the right, in the anxiety subreddits, and you see a totally different set of words: worry, fear, attack, and panic. Right away, this gives us our first big clue that these communities are having very, very different conversations. But before we get into all the differences, the researchers found something pretty remarkable. It turns out, underneath it all, the conversations in all of these communities, whether they were for depression, anxiety, or just general mental health, were all built on the exact same 4 pillars. And here they are. It doesn't matter what the specific condition is. People tend to talk about 4 universal things: how it messes with their everyday life, the raw struggle of just dealing with the disease, the whole journey of getting a diagnosis, and their experiences, good or bad, with therapy. It's like this shared human journey, even if the paths look a little different for everyone.
Okay, and this is where the findings get really fascinating. Because when you start to look inside those four pillars, you discover that people with depression and people with anxiety are having dramatically different conversations about them.
This just illustrates that divide perfectly. On the left, in the depression model, check out the diagnosis section. The topic of suicide is right there, front and center. But now look at the right, in the anxiety model. Diagnosis there is all about panic attacks and physical symptoms. And notice how coping is a huge theme for anxiety, but it's way less emphasized for depression. These aren't just different words. They show completely different mindsets. So the crucial point is this. Conversations in the depression forums, they tend to circle around these internal states, things like negative self-reflection, hopelessness, and this really deep sense of being isolated. But in the anxiety forums, it's much more focused on action. People are talking about active coping strategies, stress relief techniques, and how to manage the physical symptoms of their condition. And you can see this in the nitty-gritty details. In depression communities, the everyday life talk is often about breakups, money problems, or feeling completely alone. Meanwhile, in the anxiety communities, the focus shifts to worrying about family, the fear of confrontation, or just managing stress from work or school. It's a super clear and really telling difference. So why does any of this matter? Well, because understanding what people are talking about in these spaces gives us this raw, unfiltered window into their needs, and it reveals the true purpose these communities are really serving. What the study found was that, yeah, people are looking for information, but that is not their main goal, not even close. As you can see here, the overwhelming reason people come to these forums is for emotional support, to connect with others, to feel understood, and honestly to just feel less alone.
And this quote from the study itself really drives that point home. It's the need for emotional connection, for validation, that is the real engine behind these online health communities. It's all about finding other people who just get it.
So, what's the bottom line here? Well, these online communities are an absolutely vital lifeline, especially for people who feel isolated. Their main purpose is providing emotional support. And these conversations offer unfiltered insights that could actually revolutionize offline healthcare. But, and this is a big but, they are not a replacement for professional help, and the risk of getting bad advice or misinformation is very real. And all of this leaves us with one final, really important question to think about. These digital communities are clearly filling a deep human need for connection and for understanding, a need that so often goes unmet in the real world. So the question is, what can we learn from how they work to build a more supportive, less stigmatizing world for everyone, both online and off?